G'day and welcome back to Action RC. I'm Scott Guyett. You know what's about to happen, don't you? Since Schumacher announced the re-release of the Cat 2000 in the form of the Cat 2000 Classic, I have, of course, been very excited. This has been one of my all-time favourite four-wheel drive cars. It's just arrived this week. We thought we'd take a quick look what's inside the box, talk a little bit about this car. It's going to take me a couple of weeks to get to building. I'll talk a little bit about that later. So for today, though, it's just to have a little look inside the box. Schumacher released the Cat 2000 for the first time as a prototype or a pre-production car just in time for the 1993 IFMA World Championships at Basildon in England. They just missed the World Championship there, of course, tasting defeat at the hands of one Masami Hirosaka, no surprise. But Kevin Moore, William Mitchum, Ben Sturnham putting three cars into the final, two on the podium in the hands of Kevin Moore and William Mitchum. A pretty impressive first run out. We first saw the car here in Australia just a few weeks after that World Championship event. It arrived the day before the New South Wales State Championship, which was being run at St Ives, home of the 1989 World Championships. We've told this story before. A pre-production version of the car landed. It was entirely in a clear plastic bag, every single part loose in the bag with an exploded diagram. That was it. No box, no instructions, no packaging. And we tried really hard, but we couldn't get the car built. It literally arrived for us trackside the day before those New South Wales Championships. We built that car over the weeks that followed and ran that car for the next 2 years and continually improving as little bits and pieces, option parts came out. And we really loved that car. Probably for me at its peak in early 1995, just before the release of the Cat 2000 EC, the laydown version of the Cat 2000. And I don't imagine it'll be a surprise if we see one of those conversion kits or an EC come out from Schumacher at some point. For me, the high point of the car, that 1995 I talked about, the Australian Championships at Jimboomba, somehow managed to get the car on the front row before I crashed from the lead in every final and lost, ended up finishing fourth. It was a terrible, terrible result in the end, but a fabulous car that I really loved. It followed, of course, from the Boss Cat. This is a Works, my original Works version of the Boss Cat from 1993. The Boss Cat had been the kind of ultimate expression of the Cat series that started with that short wheelbase version, then the longer wheelbase that Masami Hirosaka famously won the World Championship with in 1987, the Cat XL, the Cat XLS, the Pro Cat. The Boss Cat was a further iteration of that, lowering the chassis to lower the center of gravity, lifting the belt drive train above the chassis, but it was a kind of a linear progression through from Cat to Cat XL, XLS, Pro Cat, Boss Cat. With the Cat 2000, it was a completely new platform entirely for Schumacher, and that's what we've got in front of us. So the Cat 2000 Classic just re-released. We're just going to take a quick look inside the box. I'm going to move the camera so you can look over my shoulder while we do that. We're going to get to build this car over the next few weeks and give it a run, but for now, let's take a look what's inside the box. So here it is in all of its glory, the Cat 2000, brand new out, Cat 2000 Classic. Nice new box art, but all familiar colours, those 80s fluoro colours. Pretty typical box packaging from Schumacher. Some photos of the car, a little bit of the background story there from its introduction in 1993, replacing that Boss Cat that we just talked about a moment ago. Its pedigree would continue right through. In fact, in 1997, again, two cars on the podium at the IFMA World Championships in the hands of Jukka Stanari and Timo Leinu, once again tasting defeat at the hands of Masami Hirosaka. At the back of the box, again, photo of the car, body off this time. We can see there's a few little bits and pieces that are slightly different. In those days, the anodizing inside the car was red rather than purple, and some of the option parts, alloy transmission housings, different hexes, different alloy pivot blocks and servo mounts, LiPo mount, of course, to bring the car up to modern day, and the rear alloy transmission housing. Certainly that was an option that we picked up and ran with quite a lot in the original days of the Cat 2000. All of these anodized parts were not purple back in the original cars, but that is the color of Schumacher in these days. So let's take a look inside the box. I'm imagining, I've not actually looked inside here yet, so you're going to see it with me, but I think we'll probably see a pretty typical packaging from Schumacher. That is where each major step of the build is packaged together. Got some kind of stud tyres. Look like they're going to be best suited to probably grass, maybe AstroTurf, but probably, to be honest, we won't even bother mounting those up here in Australia. Open cell foam inserts, we might use some of those. We'll talk a little bit about that a little later on, or when we get to building what tyres we'll be running here in Australia. And then the bag. So let's see if we can find, so what have we got here? Parts bag B and C. So this will be parts bag A. So this is where the build starts. We've got suspension, transmission housings, the original slipper clutch, a single pad clutch, it was back in the day, and the telescoping drive shafts. The later versions of these became, with roller bearings, needle bearings, alloy versions of those. We've seen those released in the Cougar 2000, the Cougar 2 Classic, Cougar 2 Works Classic, just in recent years. So that is potentially an upgrade item there to move from those plastic telescoping slider shafts. But it looks like we start the build with transmission. It's a couple of shock towers, or there's at least the rear shock tower in there. So I think we'll probably be starting with the rear end of the build. Then we go to bag 2, parts bag 2, gives us all the front suspension parts, suspension arms and uprights, steering pieces. There's the U-bar. So famously, the Cat 2000 front suspension arms were mounted on a U-shaped bar, if you like, rather than 2 hinge pins, and that bar could pivot up and down. So the car, as it was supplied back in the day, shipped with 2 or 3 different front plates that allowed you to run different front caster. We'll see whether those different plates are in the kit or perhaps they're options, but certainly that was an option to, in fact, not just caster, but kick up. Bag number C, so that's going to be the rest of the build. Looks like shock absorbers there, those purple alloy heat sinks that we've seen inside the car, all the finishing off components. Great to see the traditional Schumacher battery straps in there. They were seen on many cars of many brands back in the day of sub-C sized nickel cadmium and nickel metal hydride batteries. So parts bag C, that's the shocks and all the finishing bits and pieces. As is the usual for this company, all the greases and oils will be ball differentials, of course. So we've got shock oils here, some thread lock. Then we get to the body shell. We'll pop that out of the bag just to have a look. I'll be sending this body off to Mr. Tony Gray, who is so kind and generous to do all of my painting for me, particularly on these vintage builds. That is the classic Cat 2000, the original Cat 2000 body shell. With that nice little air scoop at the top. We used to cut that air scoop out, put some mesh in to keep the larger pieces of rock and sand and gravel out of it, but it feeds nice cool air directly onto the motor. And there's little scoops on the side. We would sometimes cut those out as well for hot conditions here in Australia. I do love a traditional cab rearward body shell shape of these classic old cars. We've got the hex drive. So the first transition for Schumacher to hex drive wheels, they were a little larger than the modern hexes, dish wheels. We do have some option spoked wheels as well from JC Racing. Lexan under tray and wing, and that gets us down to the chassis. So a fibre chassis, Schumacher have called this traditionally S1, fiberglass in a sense, not a carbon chassis, although I imagine there will be carbon chassis options. And you can see there the offset battery mounting position, which was kind of something that we got to towards the end of running with this car, and the 3 or 4 cell option on this side. So back in the day when we were running NiCad batteries, you could run 3 cells forward on this side or 3 cells back, or in fact you could run 4 on this side, 2 on that side, offsetting the weight of the motor. Motors in those days weren't quite as centrally mounted as they are these days. So there were lots of options around moving the weight around on the chassis plate. So that gives us the chassis. And then the top deck, big hole in that top deck, if my memory serves, and we'll find this out in the build. That was partly around a belt tensioner. So that's the front of the car, the rear up here where the motor mounts, and I think that was the belt tensioner that passed through that gap in the chassis at the front. So that gives us the top deck. Look at these fabulous 90s colours on the decal sheet, the Cat 2000, the famous Cat logo, Cat tyres, radical, kicking, dude, all of the kind of 80s classic lingo and colours on the sticker sheet. This looks like some decals there for windscreens on the body shell, and that gets us down to the instruction manual, full color instruction manual, as has been the way. Little addendum there offering some information that suggests that long boss pinions are necessary for the Cat 2000. So that is one of the things to look out for. Make sure that you've got some long boss pinions suitable for this car, and think about spur gears as well, depending on what sort of motor you'll be running. Typically the car ships with a 95 tooth spur. I think from memory, this could be wrong, it was around a 2.0 to 1 gear ratio. We'll see. But yeah, as we suspected, start with the rear of the car, suspension, transmission, the first of those famed Schumacher ball differentials, first of two to build in the car, the slider drive shafts, and on the build goes. We move to the front end steering pieces, and then assemble the belts. Twin belt drive for the first time in Schumacher. So that was the big shift here, from the 3-belt transmission of the earlier Cat platform to the 2-belt transmission of the Cat 2000. Short belt at the rear mounted motor, and a longer belt to the front. Once again, the very click or very shock pistons to allow you to set 1, 2, 3 or 4 holes open. I think there'll be fixed pistons in the kit as well. Probably that's where I'll start. I do recall pretty much always running 3 holes open. A great exploded diagram in the middle, which gives us some information on some of the option parts. Some wheels, different springs, front and rear spring kits, and so on. And the build goes through, and then we'll get to the back of the kit, the back of the instruction manual here, and we get a whole look at all of the different tyres. These are not the vintage tyres, these are the current, these include the current Schumacher tyres suited for things like carpet and Astro, honeycombs and mini pins and cactus and so on. None of that, mezzos, none of those will be used here in Australia. We will be running this car on, say it with me, dirt, that's right. And then, as was always the case, a whole bunch of information from Schumacher on setup options: ride height, toe, shock mount, angles, camber, rear wishbone mounting holes, lipo positions. So now we've got some different lipo mounting positions that we've got in the car. We can run the lipo longitudinally down the right-hand side or transverse across the car with shorty lipos, and there's a couple of different options there to move the weight around a little bit. Of course, you could build this car with old school nickel metal hydride or NiCad cells if you want to. We will not. We'll be running lipo shorty packs and the 17.5 brushless motor that is the norm for four-wheel drive vintage racing here in Australia. There's our transmission ratio. So yep, a 2.0 to 1, and probably with the kit build we'll need to go to a smaller spur to be able to get down to the kind of ratio for that 17.5. And there's the option parts. Some of those bits and pieces that we saw on the outside of the box, some extra pieces, carbon fiber pieces, a carpet protector if you're running on carpet, and so on, all of the chassis parts. So that is pretty much a look inside the box. We'll close this all up. I've got a couple of final thoughts for you, and then we'll be right back. So that's a little introduction to the Cat 2000. A couple of extra bits and pieces to show you. Did pick up a couple of option parts to start the build. The alloy front transmission housing. We'll add the rear to that as soon as it's available. Some of the option parts still following along. And a spring tuning kit, of course, which will add some options for us. Those are the long rear springs, so we'll have the medium springs for the front. A couple of other bits and pieces. I talked about those JC spoked wheels. So we've picked up black and yellow to give us some options, depending on what paint scheme the master, TFG, Tony Gray, comes up with. But a nice 6-spoke wheel, and I certainly loved running those back in the day. In terms of rubber, one of our longtime partners here at the Action RC channel, Speedy RC. So we've gone with the Jetco Desirer, a pretty standard mini pin tyre suited for our local dirt track here at Chargers RC in Brisbane. So that'll be the rubber we'll go with. And then our electronics partner, Mac 1, the little M1 size series 10 scale servo, and their titanium series lipo shorty pack. So with thanks to M1, one of our partners, again, that's where we'll be fitting out the car in terms of electronics. We'll probably add some Hobbywing motor and speed control, and that'll get us going. That is the Cat 2000. Now, I said at the start it's going to take me a little while to get this car built. We're just about to fly off to Thailand for the TITC touring car race. We'll be helping to cover that race. You might see this video before we fly off, or you might see it when I get back. And then from there we go to New Zealand for the first round of the Asian Buggy Championships you can catch that live as well. When we get back from all of that, a couple of weeks from now, we'll get to building this bad boy. Of course, we will have for you the build story and the run story and footage when we get this car on track here at Chargers RC in Brisbane, Australia. It is dirt track racing. In fact, there's a whole new dirt surface, a clay surface about to go down at Chargers RC. Maybe by the time we get this car track ready, that new clay surface will be up and running. Can't wait for that one. This is the Schumacher Cat 2000 Classic. A little quick introduction to the car, some of its history. It is a build that we've been very much looking forward to, and we look forward to sharing that with you in a couple of weeks. Once again, I'm Scott Guyatt for Action RC. Thanks for joining us.